Hello and welcome to TAIBU's first podcast, the Be in Good Health show in honor of the late Denise Brooks. My name is Liben. I'm the CEO of TAIBU Community Health Center, and I'll be your host for this following episodes and podcasts that we're going to bring to you. TAIBU is celebrating its 15th anniversary this year, and we have been located in the Malvern neighborhood, but providing services to the community across the Greater Toronto area. Primary health care, health promotion, health prevention, community project, community crisis response, and several programs that we have been delivering to the community with the objective of improving the health and well-being of the Black communities and the Malvern neighborhood residents as well. Throughout this podcast, we aim to promote and celebrate Black health, Black wellness. We're also going to be talking about different topics, including chronic disease, mental health, social determinants of health, and we aim to bring different professionals and stakeholders and partners and friends and colleagues into the space to really enrich the conversation that we need to have in our communities. And so please continue to follow us, and it will be a very encouraging discussions that we will have. Now, let me share a little bit about how this podcast came to be. It was inspired, it was the idea of a great friend, colleague, mentor, the late Denise Brooks. Denise Brooks is a very powerful, impactful Black woman in leadership in the healthcare and community services sector, who has provided significant contribution to the health and well-being of Black communities, racialized communities, vulnerable communities, people who are struggling in society. Denise's, passion was always to talk about these issues, bring these issues for conversation, and amplifying and representing the voices of the communities that she served over, many years. And she really was pushing me personally to start a podcast. And she would always call me and say, "Where's the podcast? What's happening with the podcast?" Unfortunately, I didn't get to work with her on the podcast before her passing away. But as part of us keeping the legacy of Denise Brooks, it is something that I've been thinking about over the years. And now reached this time when we are able to start this podcast, particularly on the 3rd anniversary of her passing on July 28, 2020. So this is a very, heartwarming project that we've been working on. And it is also very meaningful because it is about continuing the work of Denise and continuing her legacy as well. You all may know that Denise was the executive director of the Hamilton Urban Core Community Health Center in Hamilton. She has been leading that organization for over 2 decades. She has, brought various essential services to many, vulnerable, complex clients in Hamilton. And she is a beacon of hope and inspiration for many, including the staff of Hamilton Urban Core, the clients of Hamilton Urban Core, but also throughout the province. She has demonstrated her leadership even within the Alliance for Healthier Communities when she was as a past president of the Alliance's board. Equity, policy, racism, poverty, these were the subjects that she always made sure people paid attention to. And so through this podcast, we will continue to bring about these issues around policy, equity, poverty, racism, and how these are impacting communities, but also finding ways through conversation, education, awareness of how to bring about a change and to improve the health and wellness of Black and racialized communities. So I'm very, very honored and privileged to have this first episode of the Be in Good Health show in honor of the late Denise Brooks. And obviously, the first episode will be about Denise. We're starting there to ground ourselves into her vision, her passion, her commitment, her resilience, her fight, so that it will help us to plan the next other episodes. And so, in our first episode, we will bring Denise into the conversation through our engagement and discussion with her elder sister, Vicky Brooks-Johnson, and then also Nala Ndawana, who is her colleague and friend, and the person who succeeded Denise and became the executive director of Hamilton Urban Core Community Health Center. We will start there. We will bring Denise into the space, into our conversation. We will learn about her passion, what drove her, how was she as a sister, how was she as a family member, how was she as a colleague, how was she as a boss. And then that will be our first episode. So I will ask you to follow us and continue your participation in this podcast. Thank you. So welcome again to the Be in Good Health show in honor of the late Denise Brooks. Today I have a very, very important guest with me, and I'm very, very pleased, honored, and thank you very much, Vicky Brooks-Johnson, the sister of Denise Brooks. I had the opportunity of working with Vicky in a few projects. I actually met Vicky through Denise, and so I'm very, very happy to have you here and to have this conversation. As we've spoken, we started this podcast because of Denise's vision. I really wanted to share information, have conversation around racism and poverty, and she always wanted to have this podcast to be able to engage other people. She always said to me, as I say all the time, where's the podcast? What's happening with the podcast? And passing, I really, that stuck with me. And I said, if there's anything that Denise wanted, is have these conversations, continue this conversation. So I'm very, very happy to have you here with us today to share some of the stories that maybe a lot of people don't know about Denise. And so maybe we can start to say, how, Denise, how is she like a sister? How is she like a family member? And what inspired her to get into this kind of role?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Liben. It's, an honor to be here to speak about my sister and her work and what was important to her. And yeah, it's heartfelt to be here, but it's also sad as well. But Denise as a sister, well, there were 5 of us and she's second born. She was determined. I think my mom said she was determined from the day she was born. So she's always been, some people might say, stubborn and obstinate, but determined describes Denise. And she was always had a heart for other people. She was, a good mediator in the family with our younger brothers and always on the block with all the neighborhood children as well. So she had this strength and determination and kind of always looking out for people from the time she was very young. And I think what started to mold her being as a caring, kind of looking out beyond the family and friends was the era that we grew up in. That was a very formative time for us growing up as teenagers, young teenagers, during the late 60s and early 70s with all of the social unrest that was going on. And when we looked at TV at night, black and white TV with the rabbit ears, I know the young people can't relate to that now. Seeing the protests against the war in Vietnam, seeing the lunch counter sit-ins in the civil rights era and all of violence, the attacked dogs and just seeing all of that, apartheid in South Africa, it was just really a period of time of tremendous social and political upheaval. We were marching on Yonge Street for Canada and the US to divest of South Africa and go into the grocery store and not buying oranges from South Africa, that type of thing. We also got involved socially and politically as young people in the Black Youth Organization, which I later found out as an adult that we were on the RCMP list of subversive groups, which was a shock to me. But anyway, so those were the times that we grew up as teenagers. And Denise was always very outspoken. We had to do something in school called public speaking, and speeches she would write would always be about the injustices, the imbalances. And she would also, at that time, she also started writing poetry. So she was very artistic in terms of writing, speech writing. She won all kinds of speech contests, public speaking contests, and kept books of her poetry. She never published them, but yeah, she was always very deep thinking, but very action orientated too. So that was Denise.
And like some of the things I didn't know, like that she participated in speech contests and stuff. But now I can relate to the way that she presents herself and communicates her ideas and her passion. Very powerful.
Yes.
Very engaging. And we were talking to Nala. Nala was worked with her, and something that Nala said was, whenever you had a meeting with Denise, it was not just a conversation. There had to be some action, right? So, and now she was very action oriented.
Yes.
Probably because of what you experienced as siblings, as family in those formative years, that would lead her to say things have to change.
And if I could add to that too, not just what we saw on television, but we grew up in Aurora, which is now a very multicultural suburban area just north. Everybody knows about Aurora now. We moved to Aurora when I was 7, Denise was 4. And our 3 younger sibling brothers were not yet born. They were born when we moved to Aurora. And Denise used to always tell people, when we were living in Aurora, growing up as children, there were only 7 Black people in Aurora, and they all lived under the same roof. And that was our family. So that was also, I think, very formative. We went to the local high school, and at that time, Dr. G.W. Williams Secondary School, students had to be bussed in from neighborhood areas. There was only one high school in the area. And so it was a large high school at the time, over 1,000 students, I would think, because from King City, there was no high school yet in King City. So students were bussed in from King City and those surrounding areas. And so it was very interesting growing up in times where you had Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and we were very much tuned in to those people, that movement in the States, the Black Panthers, and bringing these issues forward in, English writing assignments. As I said, we had to do public speaking. That was part of the curriculum. So I was engaged in that as well. But Denise was the person who was really out front there, putting these issues out front in the town of Aurora with only 7 Black people and all of these social unrest and things on the move. So she was very articulate about those issues and passionate about those issues from a young age.
So we're beginning to understand where this passion came from. One of the things I have learned from Denise as my mentor, as my good friend, my boss sometimes, is her persistence and resilience. Is that where that also came up? And she faced a lot of challenges, obstacles, resistance. At least I know from Hamilton Urban Core and what could have taken place, should have taken place, but nobody paid attention. She was always faced with those barriers, but that never stopped her. Where is that strength, that resilience, that persistence?
Denise was the type of person who she looked for ways to connect with people. And she always believed in everybody had something good that they could offer, and everybody could bring something to the table. So I think also being born May, Taurus the bull, that persistence, and because she felt so strongly about things, if you couldn't get over it, you get under it or around it or through it. And she was very good at making connections, alliances. A lot of them required a lot of hard work, a lot of hard fought for work to make those connections and find the people that were like-minded. And she was very good at even bringing on board people who were not at first like-minded, but there was always a way she felt that you could tap into an interest, a concern that everybody could relate to. And if it was a specific project, everybody could find a way to connect. And at the same time, yes, there was a lot of resistance to many of the initiatives, not just at Hamilton Urban Core, but outside as well. Being a woman, a Black woman in a position of leadership and authority was a challenge everywhere for Black women, and still is an ongoing challenge in order to, have the respect paid, and respect not just as a person, as a woman, but as a person who is knowledgeable and who is qualified. So those were always hurdles that needed to be tackled. There were many in her long tenure as the ED at Hamilton Urban Core, and before in her other positions before as well. But Denise would always, again, make partners and find a way to keep pushing forward for the things she felt strongly about.
I think, it's true. I mean, for people to see a Black woman have such knowledge, because Denise was very knowledgeable. I mean, it's not just the way she spoke, but the content of what she presented. There was no way people could not find that as a convincing argument.
Yes.
When she spoke on behalf of communities, when she spoke on behalf of those marginalized, those clients of Hamilton Urban Core, there was no way that you could not find that a convincing argument. But because the system is set up in such a way, they would find that as a challenge for them as well. So I think her being a Black woman in leadership and knowledgeable with such passion, I think probably would have been some of the cause of the challenge that she received. But she always pulled through. And I think one of the things that is important, like one of the important things of a legacy, is the building. And I know that was a significant part of her fight. And I remember coming to TAIBU. The fight for Hamilton had already started 15 years ago. It took 15 years to get where we are today. What does it mean that the building is now almost, going to be completed next year? Will carry the name of Denise, the Denise J. Brooks Community Hub. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to the family? And what should it mean to us as a community?
Mm-hmm. For the family, it's a great honor to have Denise's legacy recognized in this way, for the contributions, for the work that she made to the whole city of Hamilton, and particularly the urban core, which she was very passionate about. Again, people would always, not people, the people resisting Denise's, Denise in the position, would always, there would always be this, well, what qualifies you to be there? Like, you're not qualified, you're not this. But just being a woman and being a Black woman there, your very existence in that space is questionable. And it wouldn't matter what papers or, degrees. You could have degrees from here to Hamilton, and you would still not be viewed as qualified. So it's very significant that there's going to be sort of like a permanent tribute to the work that she and the people who worked hard with her for. She believed first and foremost that the clients that were served by Hamilton Urban Core deserved a space that was decent, that was healthy, that was inviting, that they could get the care and get the services that they were deserving of, because they also, the clientele of the urban core, were seen as not qualified, not deserving. And also, she felt very passionately the staff who served and provided these services deserved the space, deserved to come to a space where it was healthy, socially and physically healthy. It was nurturing for staff and for the clients, and that it would be a vital part of the community, which Hamilton Urban Core was at its former location at the renovated Greyhound bus station. It was a formidable force in the community, in the inner city community. So it's very important. It's important, I think, for the clients, for the staff, for the community of Hamilton, that this building is being built, and that the clients will have a place that they can be proud, they can be comfortable, they can be served with dignity, with respect, that, they shouldn't have to earn, just people in need who are deserving of services and are qualified for those services should have nothing less than any other community of people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the fight was always about the clients and making sure that the clients were served with dignity. That has always been Denise's fight. I think she was very much concerned about how clients were being received, and I think that was the work. At least I learned is always amplifying the voices of the community. I know some of the project, the Truth Hearing that she started, was about amplifying the voices of the community. So the clients would see that, and through her fight and through the legacy that she leaves, I think that space will be a great space for people to acknowledge that everybody deserves a decent space. My last question, or one of my last questions, will be: I know Denise has had started quite a lot of initiatives. In your opinion, what are the services that we should make sure, or some of the work that she started, we need to make sure that we need to carry on, because we know the work is not easy, but we also have to make sure that what has been laid as a foundation for us to continue, because her impact, was not just in Hamilton, right? As the president, at one time the president of the Association of Community Health Centers, or the Alliance now, she has been pushing agenda of bringing action and plan around racism, inequities for racialized communities, Black communities. So she touched the lives of many people across Ontario, probably across Canada. So it would be good for us to know what is it that we need to carry forward, because I think that is how her legacy is going to. I mean, the building is one piece, but the work is another piece, and the work is across the province, across Canada. What do you think are the things that we should carry forward?
I think one of the most important things, Denise, especially when she was in that position as the chair of the Ontario Association of Community Health Centers, was this saying that if something is not in policy, then it's pretty much not going to get done. And she was very, very, very instructive and persistent and influential in having racism seen, written into policy as a social determinant of health. She advocated for that, and I know that that was something that was very important to her and to a lot of people who supported that as well. And in that vein as well, when she went to South Africa for an international conference that involved looking at these issues of racism and social determinants of health, economics, it was like a kind of an all-encompassing international kind of conference. And one of the things that really struck her, well, first of all, just, setting foot on the continent, on the soil. As a child of African descendants who were enslaved, that was very, very life-changing for her. And she spoke about that often, that just to be, and the welcoming ceremony. There was a special welcoming ceremony for those who were of descendants who had been transported into slavery. So that was very meaningful to her. And I think very soul kind of fulfilling for her. It's like, I guess, if you ever get the opportunity to visit the motherland as a descendant of enslaved Africans, that it probably is life-changing. Everybody who has done the journey, regardless of what part of the continent you are on, there is a definite change in your life. And the other thing that she remarked about that I always remember, she was saying that political apartheid had been dismantled, but economic and social apartheid was very still much a part of the fabric of the country, and that it was going to take a lot more than just legislation to make up or to address all of the ills of apartheid, the economic disadvantages, the educational. So people are now free to vote, free to travel without identification cards. But when you are so far, have been put back so far economically, where is that economic base? Where is the educational base in order for people to move forward? It's almost like post-slavery in the United States, where, a declaration is signed and you are now free, but there's no economic base. There's no reparation for the economic ills and disadvantages. It's almost like, okay, you're on your own, good luck. And she spoke about this in terms of her visit to South Africa. So I think that policy is very important, and that Denise would want for anybody working in health and social services to advance policy, because these blocks, these are more than just attitudes. They are part of a structure that has been in place for decades, generations, hundreds of years. And it's going to take more than just, holidays and kumbayas to redress these policies that have held people down, held them back, not allowed for everyone in the society to, become their full self. And that people, the majority of people who find themselves in situations where they need policy action in order to address the ills that they face, that these are not attributes of people, they're not personality attributes. These are the results of specific social and economic policies that have been in place structurally, and that she would always want people to remember that that is the level that things have to be addressed at. I don't think that the majority of people who find themselves in economic comfort or stress or health distress, any kind of distress, would choose to be in those positions. So it takes a look at the structures, the social structures, those invisible things that everybody knows that are there, but somehow, it's either just the way it is, or, pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of thing. No, it's going to take a more concerted effort than that. Progress has been made, but there's still a long way to go.
And the reason why I smiled when you said kumbaya, that's always her warning to say, like this small things happening, that's not where the real change is coming. We need to push for policies and legislation and making sure there are structures that needs to change and not just small programs here and small programs. I think that's very, very important. And I think what you mentioned about poverty and economic racism, if you want want to call it that way, were the things that she always made sure, because the economic deprivation of certain communities or disadvantages of certain communities is what is leading to that. So policy, working around poverty and addressing those poverty issues for Black and marginalized and racialized communities, I think those are the things we need to pay attention to. Anything else that you may want to mention about Denise? I'm very touched. Just like you, I feel good and I also feel a bit sad. But thank you for bringing Denise into this conversation, because through what we were sharing now, I could feel her presence here, her energy.
Yes.
Her energy towards, we need to do something. Every time, as you know, every time there's a call from Denise.
Oh, yeah.
It's something has to be done.
I used to get nervous.
Yeah.
What now?
Yes. It's always something has to be done.
Yes. Yeah. And it was always, I was just watching this program on TV and on BET about, young Black girls. And I think we can do something like that here. And I'd be going, oh boy, on the other end of the phone. Here we go.
No, it's always like when there's a call from Denise, yes, it's also how are you checking in.
Yeah.
But we got to do something.
Yeah.
She's always about action. And she would not take no for an answer, because she'll say, no, we have to find a way of doing this.
Yes.
So it's always about action. So I think policy, addressing poverty, and taking action, I think probably would be the three things that...
Yes, and she was very creative in finding ways to get things done. Creative financially, creative in connecting with people, creative in bringing resources on board. She was always... There was never a time when she said, oh, we can't do this, or there's no way to get this done. There was always a way. And she was right. There was always a way.
No, and that is the testament from Hamilton Urban Core's work. They were the least funded of all CHCs in the province, but they're the ones who were creative, innovative in addressing the needs of, and like the Syrian refugees. When they went
because they had to be, because of that resistance, because of that, trying to turn away from what they were fighting for. They had to be creative. They had to be persistent. So it was a lot of extra work and energy, but then a lot of good came from that. But, the staff worked hard, the clients worked hard, the leadership worked hard, and there was always the way. Over, under, around, or through.
Yes.
Always.
That's Denise Brooks.
That's Denise.
You can't say no to needs in the community. And if we need to do it, we need to do it.
Yes.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Liben.
I do appreciate this. We just heard from Vicky how Denise's passion to serve others started at a very early age. And now we'll be hearing from Nala and see how that passion continued in the workspace. So please welcome Nala Ndawana, who has very important and close relationship with Denise Brooks, both in her role at Hamilton Urban Core CHC. Nala is the previous executive director of Hamilton Urban Core Community Health Center. But prior to that, and when we met, Nala was the primary healthcare manager at Hamilton Urban Core. She was the primary healthcare manager there for 4 years. And so who knows Denise closer in action at Hamilton Urban Core in the community, in providing the leadership, not just for Hamilton Urban Core, but also for all of us, including TAIBU. And we'll talk more about some of the things that we've done together, but for Nala to just share with us a little bit about Denise and who she is, what she represents, where does she brings her energy and things like that. So I'm very, very honored and pleased to welcome my sister Nala in this conversation. And very recently, Nala was also the recipient of the Adriana Tetley Leadership Award from the Alliance for Healthier Communities for the role that she's played in her leadership at Hamilton Urban Core, something that is very close to Denise's legacy as well. So very pleased to have this conversation with Nala. So, Nala, welcome to the Be in Good Health podcast in honor of Denise Brooks. This is something that Denise really always, you may have been in those conversations, always wanted us to have some kind of a medium for communication and bringing out the issues that is impacted Black communities. And she really wanted some kind of a communication platform such as a podcast. And so I'm very, very pleased and honored to have you here and talk about, her legacy here. So if I could just start and ask you, how did you meet Denise, and what was your relationship like with her?
Thank you so much, Liben, for inviting me to this important conversation. In terms of Denise Brooks, I met her actually when I applied. I saw this posting on our website for a primary healthcare manager at the time. They were looking for a primary healthcare manager, and I remember I was working outside of Hamilton, but arrived from Montreal, living in Hamilton, looking for something that was a nonprofit in leadership and specifically around newcomers. And I saw this posting and I thought this would be such a perfect fit for my experience, my background. And of course, the thing that caught me when I was doing some of the research was that it was a Black-led organization. So that, of course, resonated with me as a Black woman living here in Canada, knowing the barriers that folks face, especially in Hamilton. So I applied for the position, and that's when I met Denise at the interview. And I think it was one of those interviews that was so profound and life-changing that even if I hadn't gotten the job, I would have somehow figured out how to stay connected with the organization. So that was my introduction to Denise Brooks. In her, her presence was so powerful, and I walked out of the interview so excited and invigorated to do more. Even if I didn't get this particular job, I knew I needed to do more than what I was already doing. So yeah, that was my my introduction to Denise Brooks at Hamilton Urban Core. And of course, I did end up getting the position, so I really did get to work with her.
You remind me, when you mentioned the interview, you remind me the first time I met Denise and I didn't know her was at my interview for the position of the executive director at TAIBU. And it was the second interview. And the first interview, she was not there, but she was present on the second interview. And she was the person who was asking those questions. And I was like saying to myself, why is she like challenging me? Why is she bringing all these difficult questions? And I really knew what she was trying to do. I think she was trying to get the things that were inside me. She was pushing to bring those answers or those, knowledge that I had by putting pressure on me. She was like, after everybody says, okay, I'm good with the question, she will probe again and say, can I add another question? And I was like, what is wrong? What is wrong? Then I realized that she was really pushing me to demonstrate. So you got the job.
Yes.
And if you could describe Denise to the people who had not the pleasure or the honor of meeting her, how would you describe her?
I would describe her as someone who had a lot of presence. She walked into the room, and it doesn't matter where it was, who you were with, and she started speaking, you'd all stop because you needed to hear what she was saying. I think all her conversations were very honest, went to the core issues. Whatever it was, it would go, as you're saying, they've been in your interview, she'd go straight in there and just go for it and get to the root of whatever the discussion is. I think, for those that don't know Denise and never had the pleasure of meeting her, it was someone you always felt energized after talking to her, because there was always an action associated with every conversation, right? An action, a call to action at the end of it all. So no meeting, no huddle, no table did not at the end of the day require you to do something, right? For her, the mantra was always, what difference does that make? What difference does that make in the folks that you're working with, that you're trying to serve and so yeah, and it's always the simplest question, but the most meaningful one in all of the conversations that I had with her. I would say she was a change maker, definitely a pioneer in every right, a strong advocate for access to healthcare, especially for those folks that face systematic barriers, especially racialized communities, and really was focused on talking about the social determinants of health and how they intersect with health, and also just unpacking Afrocentric approaches in terms of how do we need to change the system, how do we need to change our approaches to ensure that we're sensitive to different cultural norms within Canada. And I think one of the most, one of the most poignant thing that Denise always spoke about was the need for systematic change, and really the focus being on ensuring that every change that we're working towards is inscribed in policy, because ensuring that there's a living legacy and continuation from a systematic transformation, and not just talking about things and things eroding once individuals have come and gone, but ensuring that whatever change, whatever influence that someone has, ensure that it's written within policy. And that's the only way we can ensure that that change is going to be sustainable. So I think that was one thing that she really wanted to impress and ensure that was done in all of the action items that she had to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. If it's not in policy, the likelihood that it will take root is very, very slim. That's what she always said, and her voice is still echoing with us today. Where do you think Denise's passion for this work comes from? Do you have you had a conversation with her? Do you know where this is coming from?
From the conversations that I had with her, I think it was mostly driven from knowing herself, right? The fundamental thing about knowing who she was and knowing what role that she had to play based on her own path, as her experiences being brought up as an individual of African descent in Canada, knowing some of the privileges that she had, and also knowing some of the barriers that she and folks that look like her, that speak like her, that had hair like her, face. I think her journey really did inform her passion, I think also her openness to understand individuals that she interacted with, also informed the work that needed to be done. She continually engaged people in a meaningful way, continued to learn, continued to hear when people spoke, like not just in the room, as much as she was amazing at speaking to things, but she was also an amazing listener. I remember we'd sit for hours just after work and in her office, just talking about everything and anything, right? So, so that, I think from that, like it really drove her passion in the work that she did, because it was not just work for her, it was her life. So she was rightfully placed in the sector, chose it in a meaningful way because it resonated with who she was as an individual. So it didn't have to start and stop at any given time.
No, definitely, yeah. And at least for the time that I've really connected with her and worked with her, she has faced so many challenges. And I think one of the things for me, looking up to Denise as a leader, is leadership is not straightforward, is not always easy. But her experience is completely, I don't know if there are other leaders who have faced so many challenges and barriers and obstacles, both on a personal level, but also with the work that she was doing at Hamilton Urban Core. But she had to overcome all those obstacles over the period of time. And so maybe if you can just speak to her persistence and her resilience in the work that she's done, because I remember part of the challenges and obstacles that she faced, including space for Hamilton Urban Core and the clients and the communities, but other issues that she's faced personally from systems. That speaks to her persistence and resilience.
Absolutely. I think, when I look at, her work in coming to Hamilton Urban Core, they had already been in the trenches trying to get a new building. The building that they were at 71 Rebecca Street was literally and physically falling apart, riddled with so many things. We'd joke about, would write a novel. It was a movie every day. Something was wrong. But I think finding joy and humor in some of the most difficult ways and situations was something that I've also admired from her, although no one has to face the amount of barriers that she faced. But I think the way she overcome them was so graceful. I think the barriers that she faced as a Black woman in leadership in Hamilton was intense. I cannot speak to, the early days when she was one of the first, or if the first Black ED, executive director in a community health center. So I think, I can only imagine some of the barriers. She spoke about some, but I think, no one can truly imagine the barriers that she faced. But I think just that constant, dusting yourself up and figuring out what next. I think what I learned from her was that, and I think, Liben, you also speak to this most of the times I hear you speaking to it, that legacy of servitude. That was her approach to leadership. And I think that was what energized her when she was facing barriers that were so huge. But because she knew that if she did not continue to do the work, if she did not speak on behalf of those that were not on the table, if she did not bring those voices forward and amplify those voices, who would? Right? So it was that calling to say, if I don't do it, even if I don't feel like it today, even if I'm not feeling well, I still have to figure out and dig deep and find a way to be at that meeting, because I know if I'm not at that meeting, there's only me who looks like this in this body, who is going to ask those tough questions, who is going to hold folks accountable to some of the things within our healthcare system. And I think, that strong conviction of wanting to serve, wanting to empower. So it was not just about realizing that she had that privilege to be at those tables, but wanting to also bring along others so that there could be many that look like her, that speak to issues, find allies that can, bring that work forward. And I think, really that for me, she embodied Black excellence, because everything she did, she would say, we have to work 10 times harder. We know that, right? So we have to always be prepared going into meetings, going into presentations, because we know a lot is always riding on every word that we speak about. So that required another level of, dedication. And I think one of the things, that I learned from her is that the Black leadership in spaces that don't necessarily support what you're doing is a very lonely place. So finding your people, finding folks that will support and, light that fire every day when the road is tough, to get you back again and figure out another way forward when all the doors are closing. So yeah, I think that's what I would say in terms of some of the work and some of the barriers that she faced.
Yeah, no, and from my experience, voices and representation of voices has always been at the forefront for her. And as you said, the reason why she was pushing through, even if she was not feeling well or things were not right and she was facing all those different challenges, she always made sure that the voices for the community, the voices for the clients of Hamilton Urban Core, the voices, Black voices and their issues were represented at tables. And, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, it was around, some of the work that she has done and what we need to carry forward. I think one is to make sure that we continue to represent the voices. But I know there are some projects that she started that we need to carry forward. Can you mention a few? And maybe if you also want to talk about, maybe after the voices and what we need to carry forward, probably we could talk about the building and where it is at today, because I think that's very significant for Denise.
I think, some of the work that she was very passionate about was having a team that really addressed, in Hamilton, a team that was focused on addressing Black health issues. And some of that piece of that dream is coming to fruition through the SAPAC program, where we have a Black health team through that funding. And we have a youth mental health social workers that are Black-led, providing mental health services that are Afrocentric and grounded in those principles. That is something definitely, that is the beginnings of some of that work. Her vision has always been to ensure that there is a multidisciplinary team that focuses on Black health within Hamilton. And also at the end of the day, that there is no wrongdoing in every organization in Hamilton, that not only do you have to come to Hamilton Urban Core or another community health center to receive excellent care if you're racialized, but you should be able to go into any center and or any agency within Hamilton to receive that. That was something for sure that she wanted to work on and ensure that that is realized within our city. One other thing that was dear to her was the community truth hearings. You talk about the voices, and that was incredible in terms of the impact every day when we would sit through any of those sessions and listen to individuals speaking their truth about their journey, about the things that they're either facing or have faced because of systematic barriers and the impact that that item has had on them. You know, we held community truth hearings on poverty. We held community truth hearings on human rights. We held community truth hearings on older adults in Hamilton. We had community truth hearings on with persons who use drugs. We had truth hearings with newcomers in Hamilton. So it really went to the essence of hearing directly from the folks who are marginalized within the city, providing a safe space where decision makers, the way it was really modeled against the Truth and Reconciliation hearings from South Africa, where decision makers are sitting at the table, not being able to speak for the duration of the whole hearing, and listening to all the voices, listening to everybody who was present, who wanted to speak their truth around how they were facing their journey and some of the barriers or experiences that they were experiencing because of some of the decisions that some of the people or entities that were represented within the space. And I think that was always so powerful. Everyone who came to any of those meetings was forever changed. I know I'm forever changed because of them. And every time I sit through any one of that approach, because you put a face to the issue. It's not just an issue and a check mark on a piece of paper. It's an individual with a very specific experience that you can make the dots with. So I think that also probably, when I kind of think about it, were the things that really gave her the energy to keep going on, because she was constantly in touch directly with the voices of the folks that she was representing. So not only was she, struggling to ensure that she was present in those spaces, but constantly trying to figure out how you bring those voices forward to those spaces where folks are speaking themselves, speaking their truths directly to individuals who make decisions, right? So definitely community truth hearings was one. The other piece was for sure services around persons who use drugs. So when she did pass, she had already realized a portion of that dream, where we had the overdose prevention site in Hamilton, and we were transitioning over, applying for a consumption and treatment service, which was always the model that she wanted, which was a more supportive model with integration within the services within community health center and other care pathways. So, a growth from the pilot, which was really just about saving lives at that moment, but really trying to figure out, okay, once you save that individual that day and they live another day, what next? How do you then, support them whenever they are ready to make that decision and to take the next step in another direction? So that was always the way forward that Denise had always worked in, and the approach around harm reduction services within Hamilton and safer supply. So the next step was safer supply. And, so when you kind of look at all those items, the vision of everything, so you think you've arrived and there's more. Right. Mm-hmm. So the dream was so huge that it's a lifelong journey where you're really working towards figuring out, okay, so we think this was the decision, but we're hearing more from the people. So we need to do more. And what is more? Let's figure out how we can achieve that. And also figuring out how then it can be sustainable as well. So those are some of the projects that I would, talk about. And of course, the conference around having a space where there is a depository of information. And I think the podcast is a piece of that realization of that dream, where individuals can actually access information around health and for folks who face barriers within our community. So yeah, I'm so excited to see the work continue on, her legacy just manifesting itself in so many different ways. So thank you, Liben, for some of that work that you continue to do as well within your roles.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nala, also for bringing all those different, work that foundation were laid and still going on. I was also very privileged and honored to be part of the Amwazi Ubuntu project, which was bringing all the voices. And I think that could be a model of community engagement for institutions to carry forward and just to listen to communities, which was very, very powerful. I've sat in at least two, and we hosted one here at TAIBU as well with her presence. So thank you for that. The building was another very, very important. And I remember because when I came to TAIBU, she was still fighting the fight to have a better building for Hamilton Urban Core. That was like 15 years ago. And that's part of her persistence and resilience in not letting go. And we have arrived. I think she was there for the beginning part where the decision was made by the ministry to approve that, which was a very great celebration. Where are we today? What is happening? And how is that going to be part of her work and her legacy?
I so much has happened in that front. I think she would be proud, and she's obviously going to be so much prouder at the ribbon cutting. So I currently it's scheduled to be spring of 2024. So next year is the projected date for move-in at the Community Health Center, the new location at 430 Cannon Street East in Hamilton. The space, really, when you talk about the realization of the dream, it's really coming to fruition. We sat in so many meetings with the architects, so many iterations, trying to ensure that they captured the essence of what Denise Brooks' vision was for that building. Denise J. Brooks Community Hub is what it's going to be called in honor of her. And it's inscribed in stone. So that plaque has gone onto the actual building. So I went there, saw it with my own eyes. So excited. The space walked through the corridor. So right now they're actually working on this. They've started painting on the inside, so it is looking like a building almost. It really is taking shape. You can actually see the vision through the hub, the approach to clinical care, all the different models that she spoke of, which we've already started working on. Right now, the center has started working on in the interim spaces were actually modeled after the building at 430. So that work has already started. So I think the vision for that was making sure that there's a building that is special in the sense that when folks who face barriers come in, they feel welcomed, they feel they belong, they feel they matter. Because one of the things that was really heartbreaking at 71 Rebecca Street was that it felt that the building was falling apart and no one, because no one, was seeming not to care about the individuals who were coming to access that space. And you'd sometimes hear it with the clients even speaking to that, to say, oh, I guess our building is falling apart because no one cares about us. And absolutely, that was something that really, we talk about energizing somebody and wanting to make sure that that narrative is reversed, because she wanted to make sure that everyone who came to that space felt represented, felt safe, felt empowered. And I believe that is the vision, and that's what is being captured right now at the project in the permanent home at 430 Cannon Street. So excited about that. And the clients, for sure, they can literally smell it as they walk through the building and see it drawing closer. So yeah, it's very exciting. So spring next year is when that projected date moving.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Nala, because I know, after Dennis's passing, you had to take the mantle and continue the fight to get it to where it is today. And I know it has never been easy, and it was not easy. And I know you've taken the load to make sure that for the community, obviously, as you said, the community deserves a space where they are respected, and it's a quality space, and 71 Rebecca Street was not. Thank you for the work that you carried forward to make sure that vision was made possible. Question, you mentioned a little bit of how Denise has impacted your life, but final thoughts and comments on how she has and continues to impact and influence you, if you have any other final comments for our conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I guess we could go on forever on this one. Yeah. I think, coming from my personal journey, I came in as a refugee claimant here in Canada, having faced my own, barriers in my own home country in Zimbabwe, lived in Montreal for a bit, came to Hamilton, got this position. And I think one of the things that we would speak about as much, yes, she was a colleague, she was my mentor, but I also felt that it was also maternal. Conversations that we had were so real, and there was no topic that was always left unturned. And I think for me, that mentorship that I received from Denise, the understanding the complexities of life in general, complexities of being a Black woman in working within the Canadian system, complexities of some of the decisions that one has to make when faced with systematic challenges, and trying to figure out how do you prioritize from a set of options that are all insufficient, right? But trying to figure out how do you move that needle forward. I think for me, she has been such a strong influence in finding my true north here in Canada, my second home. I think I lost my mother before, and she was that support system when that happened. So when she passed too, it was really about trying to figure out how then do you continue, but knowing that from some of the work that I learned from my own mother, and on top of that, Denise Brooks, I was so lucky to have these two powerful, strong, opinionated Black women who were very focused and were very dedicated to individuals who face barriers in their own different spaces, and found ways to always educate, empower, create safe spaces, and a place where, as you are also growing as an individual in leadership, figure out a way to bring others along with you as well, and create that legacy of the continuation of supporting those that are trying to come into leadership in those spaces, and also how to figure out how to continue to empower individuals, because it's not about helping and being a savior. It's about figuring out how to have individuals themselves figure out how to make their own decisions about their lives and promote positive and healthy outcomes for whatever it is that it means to them. So it's not about healthy outcomes from your perspective, but outcomes from their perspectives, from their truth, from their journey. So that learning sometimes it's simple to say, and so many people say this, it's so difficult to ensure that it stays true to that, right? Because it's not about what you think somebody wants, it's about what they really want. And sometimes there's a contradiction there in terms of your own personal values and that individual's values. So recognizing that every single day, it's not about you, right? Checking yourself out at the door every time when you're stepping into those spaces to ensure that you're being authentic to the work, authentic to the person that you're claiming, you're supporting and championing. So that for me is forever, changing every single day. But that will always guide me in, all the decisions that I make and in, all the projects that I want to participate in and in all of the people that I bring into my space and ensure that those are firelighters and not firefighters in that work. So she has played a very significant role in my life and my decision, and she'll continue to do that. So yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Yes, I mean she can be everything to people she meets, right? She's the person who challenges, she's the person who advises, she's the person who encourages, she's the person who makes sure that you're okay, even though she doesn't do that for herself many times. But she's the mother who will look after people, whether it's clients, staff, seen that. And so thank you for that reflection. This is really beautiful. And I also thank you for, yes, please.
And if I may, Liben, one last thing. I think, yes, we speak about Denise Brooks in all these spaces, but I think one thing that was so important to Denise was family. She was such a dedicated mother to Jesse, the son, and she doted on him so much. And for me, that was the true calling that you would see in terms of how that then translates to everything else, right? Dedicated sister to her brothers and sisters within a family, talking about them constantly engaging, supporting, figuring out how to bring them into spaces. And, so she spoke so fondly about her family, definitely dedicated daughter to her mom and dad and all the different stories, the fun stories out here about the different barbecues.
Yes.
So yeah, and of course, a dedicated friend and mentor. And I know, Liben, to you, to all the folks, Simone, and so for sure, she was many, many things. And as you're saying, so, but just pure joy. So thank you for this opportunity to share.
And thank you for sharing this. I think it is as we are, working on this podcast and bringing some of the issues that were obviously important for Denise, but also important to communities. I think this is what is the inspiration. And as you know, she always said, Mr. Gabra Mikhail, she would call me and say, what are you doing with the podcast? And I'm saying, Denise, I'm working on it and I'm working on it. And, but this is really a very proud moment for me as well. And her inspiration and encouragement for us to continue the work and making sure that the discussion, the conversation, the action, as you mentioned, continues within our community. So it is also a great privilege for me. And thank you, Nala, for spending time with us. We look forward to continuing to engage and push through all the work that, as Hamilton Urban Core, TAIBU, all other, CHCs, Black Creek, Rexdale, we're all working towards improving the health and well-being of Black communities. And, as we say at TAIBU, be in good health and bringing the improvement of health and well-being of Black communities. So I very much appreciate your spending time with us today and looking forward to further engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Part of Denise's legacy is the establishment of TAIBU Community Health Center. TAIBU is a Kiswahili word that means it's a wish or a greeting that translates as be in good health. And Denise's legacy in the establishment of TAIBU is also very important from an organizational perspective. She was actually part of the interview panel for my position as the first executive director, but she has also contributed to the organization in various ways, including the development of TAIBU's first strategic plan, the supporting the board of governors with capacity building, governance training, and making sure that TAIBU had a very strong leadership. And so health and wellness is an important topic that we should be talking about. And we've asked Vicky what being good health means from her perspective, from the family's perspective, and how is that connected to Denise's vision. So Denise played a significant role in the establishment of TAIBU Community Health Center. She was part of the original group that were in discussions, making sure that there was a center dedicated to Black health, improving the Black health and well-being. I know she was part of the interview panel that interviewed me to come to TAIBU, and she's played an active role in making sure that I said what I needed to say by being very direct and challenging and asking difficult And so TAIBU means be in good health. And I just wanted to know from your perspective, what does be in good health mean to you and to the family of Denise Brooks?
Okay, so to be in good health, I think is a very dynamic thing. It's not a static thing. You're not healthy today. I think it's about balance. Balance in all aspects, personally, in your relationships, and in the community. So you have to have balance, physical balance, to be in good health. You have to have emotional balance. You have to have spiritual balance. You have to be able to, when it comes to a community health center, which is a very living, thriving entity, be able to roll with the punches, adapt to change, push for change. Just it's not a stagnant thing. It's not something that you achieve. Good health, either personally or as a community. It's not this goal that, once we get there, we've arrived. It's an ongoing process for life. Communities change, people change, but the basic necessities that need to be addressed, the changes beyond the confines of the community, societal changes that need to be addressed, make it so that being in good health is a constant dynamic exchange of interactions, of relationships. So that, to me, that's what being good health means, and I think that that's what it was to Denise.
Thank you for tuning in to the Be in Good Health show in honor of the late Denise Brooks, TAIBU's first ever podcast. Follow us on social media for updates on upcoming episodes and to join the conversation. If you have ideas on who you would like to see as a guest or topics you would like us cover, please fill the survey in the description box and let us know your thoughts. Tune into our next episode where we'll continue the conversation about Denise's perseverance during the many challenges that she faced as the first Black woman to hold a position of executive director at a community health center, and how her legacy continues to inspire us in our work for health equity for Black communities and racialized communities. Until then, TAIBU, be in good health.